Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Good news, I am back from vacation. Good news, the Mid-Season Madness was a success, for the most part at least. Bad news, unfortunately, is I am actually a little bit sick. I'm mostly better by now. I'm coming down from being sick for the most part, but I am still feeling a little under the weather, so I apologize. I may sound a little bad in this video, but today I am going to be doing my mid-season power rankings following the Mid-Season Madness. Of course, I'm going to bring this video up into two parts. So this is going to be part 1, where I go over teams 20 through 11, and then we will go on to taking a look at teams 10 through 1 in the next video. Obviously, I did not watch the tournament as closely live as I would have liked to, so there might be some things that in the moment I may have missed, and things that maybe some people may disagree with as a result of my analysis based on kind of what I did see and what I know could happen, but I think I try to take into account their performance during the tournament as well as leading up to the tournament is really one of the big factors in taking a look at to kind of put them where they go. I'm not looking only at the tournament, but I am definitely weighting the tournament pretty heavily. So keep that in mind as we go into this. But let's jump into it. Let's take a look at my list. It is all 20 teams together for the first time this season for me. So let's go. Let's take a look at my mid-season power rankings. All right, kicking off this list at number 20, I have the Vancouver Titans. Not much of a surprise, I think, on this one, as this is the only team that is winless still this season. I thought they were looking to get better, and I thought they were making some pretty noticeable improvements since DK has joined this roster, and I think that is still largely true, but they're still in 20 for two main reasons. One is that I think they still have a lot of issues they have to work out. I don't feel great about their tank position with False and Amir now kind of playing some of the tank role. Don't feel great about that still. I also am very curious as to why Shockwave was released from this team. I thought he was the best performing part of this team. By and large, he and Aspire were the two best pieces, I thought. And seeing him get released was interesting. No hate towards King as a player. I think King is a fine player, but I think the decision to move off of a Shockwave is an interesting one that I don't fully understand. I'm still concerned about this Titans roster. I think they're close to getting a win this season, but obviously it's halfway through the season. They're still winless. That's a pretty concerning thing to look at and thing to see for this Titans roster. So I have to just say that this Titans roster, definitely the weakest one in the league right now. Definitely number 20 based on what we have seen so far this season. Coming in at number 19, I have the New York Excelsior. This team is disappointing at every level. Obviously, we've already talked about this team adding Ho1 as a third flex support to this roster. Now they have Kuki, who has been, who's left the team as head coach. I don't know if Gesture is going to be the head coach now, or if they are going to have Undyne be their head coach. I really have no idea what's going on at this point in time. I have a lot of questions about this team. I still think that they have a lot of holes they need to fix. I still think they need another DPS player. I still think that they need a main support player, though I don't think it's as pressing as their need for a third DPS player, in my honest opinion. I still think this team has holes and has problems. I'm curious to see what happens with Kuki leaving the team and with a change in the coaching staff and the coaching structure. Maybe we see this New York roster do something else, but I just can't put this team above any of the other teams in the Western region, or even above any Eastern region teams, because I don't think they've performed well at all. I think they've kind of gotten worse in a number of ways. I don't think they've performed at a high enough level in any of their matches to really give me a ton of faith that they're really significantly improving. And so for me, they're pretty confident or pretty firmly here in the 19 spot. I think they're going to lose to pretty much every team in the Western region that is the Vancouver Titans right now. And so I don't think you can put them any higher than down at the bottom at 19. At number 18, just ahead of the New York Excelsior, I have the Paris Eternal. They did, of course, beat the New York Excelsior, so you have to give them a point for that. But even outside of that, I think they have looked better than New York in a couple of different ways. They've had their own roster turmoil, of course. Glister and Naga leaving the team, Dove and Wub joining the team. They've had some coaching changes, of course. Mobugi just recently left the team, with Faustus joining. They've had some shakeups. They've had some changes. This is not a roster that is free of some of that kind of stuff like that. But I think that they have started to look better. I think they have at least a little bit more flexibility than what New York has. They have a main support. They have a flex support. They have that tank flexibility. They only have 2 DPS players as well, but I have been a little bit more impressed with what Dove and Wub have brought to the table. So I think that this team is right now ever so slightly better than New York. I think it's very close between these two teams. I think you could flip-flop them pretty regularly, pretty consistently, but right now I think that Paris is the better team of the two. I don't think they're anything spectacular. I really do think this team right now is just kind of stalling before they go to Vegas next year. I think that's really their big thing. They're just kind of biding their time for. So all in all, just kind of a weak roster right now. They haven't performed all that well so far, and curious to see if they're able to kind of get a bit more of what we saw from them last year as we go into the second half of the season. But right now, still not very impressed by what I've seen from them, so they're here at 18. At number 17, I have the Guangzhou Charge. A lot of people might say this is a bit high for this team. Obviously, they're still bottom 4, so it's not that high of a spot, obviously, but this is a team that has not looked very good in a region that is, as we saw in the Mid-Season Madness, probably the weaker of the two regions. But why I am giving the Charge the edge over these other teams is that I thought that the Charge, the past couple of weeks, I guess it was right before the Mid-Season Madness, right at the end of the qualifiers, they made some major roster changes that I am a huge fan of. Getting rid of Unique, develop Rio, obviously Eileen a little bit earlier in the season, picking up Xerneas, Jimmy, and Aprita. Really good moves, and I'm a big fan of. I think that they've really kind of made a roster that I like better. We haven't seen this roster play, of course, as a whole roster yet. There are a lot of pieces that were with Chengdu last season. Faraway, Xerneas, formerly Yveltal, and then Aprita and Jimmy were both with the team. Aprita was with the Team Chasers, and Jimmy I just don't think got much playtime, but he was on the team. So these players, at least a lot of them, have history playing with each other. So I like the moves they made. I think that they are in a better position based on the moves that they made. I feel more confident in this roster than I do your Parises, your New Yorks, who I just think haven't done anything to really show me that they are improving. I think Guangzhou made a smart move, consolidating their team, focusing on Rio, or on Krong, who I think was the better of their two tank players. Creating a stronger support line, creating a stronger DPS line. I think they've made their team better. I think they've put themselves in a better position to succeed. And so despite the fact that I still think they are a weaker team, we haven't seen them do a lot, I'm giving them the edge over these other one-win teams because I think that the roster moves they made were very, very good, and I think were the right moves to make given the circumstances that the team found itself in. At number 16, I have the LA Valiant. Interesting team. Of course, they have had some ups and downs. They've had a lot of changes to this roster, bringing in Marvel and Molly in the kind of build up to the Mid-Season Madness, and I think they had a pretty good start to the Mid-Season Madness qualifiers, but they fell off pretty quickly as the qualifiers progressed, but ultimately still a pretty good showing from them in a number of their matches. Still, though, not enough to propel them above most of the other teams in the APAC region. And I still think if they were to be playing in the West, they probably wouldn't find much success more than they have already in the APAC region. But it's a very good kind of growth we've seen from this team. I think we've seen a lot of performances that I've been impressed with, especially from Dia. I think that Molly has played well since he joined this roster. I think Marvel's had some very good performances since he joined this roster. I definitely think this roster has improved significantly since the very beginning of this season when I thought they were going to be the worst team in the league. They have certainly not been that, but they're definitely not a team that has been super impressive. They are okay, they're fine, but I think that it is a team that we're just going to have to keep watching and see what happens. because they are an underwhelming team when it comes to their performances against your best of the best teams in the region. But they definitely have moments where they definitely pop off and look like they have that star potential to do something, but we just haven't seen them be able to make those big jumps and be consistently dominant and consistently good against some of those better level teams. At number 15, I have the Chengdu Hunters. Now, I have the Chengdu Hunters here for a couple of reasons. I still don't love the flexibility this roster has, or the lack of flexibility this roster has. I think that what we've seen from this roster, generally speaking, is that they have not looked as good as they did last season, because they just don't have the same level of completeness to this roster. Jinmu has impressed me a bit more recently with a lot of his ability to kind of pick up Tracer, which he didn't really show in the past. It's not an incredible Tracer, but it's serviceable enough that it allows Leave to play the hit scan role, and it means that Jinmu can at least do something that is pretty noticeable. And I think he actually did have a couple of decent performances on the hero in this most recent tournament cycle. But the other thing for me really is that I still think this team just doesn't have the same firepower they did last season either. I just think that losing the flexibility they had, and I think that hurts Leave quite a bit, because he's kind of being forced to be a lot more jack of all trades. He kind of has to stretch himself a little thinner than I think he would succeed at normally. I don't love what they've been doing with their tank line. I don't think Gaga is particularly as good as he was. I don't love what we've seen from Daisy this season. I think Monk and Nisha have been fine. I don't really have many criticisms for them. I just think this team is just not where they could be. I think they have some good stuff that they've done. I think they've had good moments and they've looked good in some of their matches. But ultimately, this team just isn't really where they were last season. I think that the changes have not been as strong. And obviously we know that the team has gone through a lot of things with organizational stuff that kind of impacted the team. So not that surprising to see the team struggle more than they did. So they're good. They're definitely not the weakest team in the APAC region. But I think there's a pretty decent gap between them and the top teams in the APAC region, just based on what I've seen from them so far this season. At number 14, I have the Boston Uprising. There's a couple of reasons why I gave the Uprising the edge over the Chengdu Hunters. One of them is that I think this roster has more flexibility. I think they have more nuance to this roster. There's more things they can do. Obviously, they've put a lot of attention on Punk recently, but they also have Itzal there as well. I think that their support trio of Faith, Crimzo, MCD cover pretty much everything you need them to cover. They can do a lot there. And I think that we've seen some pretty good performances out of Valentine. Victoria's been all right. And now they have Seeker on this roster, who will be able to bring a little bit of extra DPS play for them. I also think this roster just has a better opportunity to actually compete in their region than I think Chengdu has. Both of these teams are 4 points behind the next highest team above them. But I think that the chances for Boston to make a tournament over, your teams like Washington, like Florida, like Toronto, who are just ahead of them in the standings, is much higher than I think it is for a team like Chengdu to get ahead of Philadelphia, Hangzhou, Seoul, Shanghai. Like, it's very difficult for the Hunters, I think, to make that push and make that jump. The APAC region, to me, feels very locked in and very set in stone, and very hard for anyone else to really make any moves from the lower three in that region. Boston, I think, has the opportunity still to make some moves, still to make up some ground. I think they're improving. We saw London do it this past tournament cycle, where they had a really good tournament and it propelled them up in the standings. I think Boston could do a similar type of thing based on what we've kind of seen from them. I don't necessarily think they're as good as London, of course, but I think that this is a team that has some potential, has shown a little bit more this season, and so I think that they deserve some credit, and that is why they've struggled a bit this season, but I think they still are good enough to beat out some other teams in the APAC region, and of course sit here in the 14th spot. At 13, I have the Washington Justice. I want this team to be good. I really want this team to be good. It is something that I just struggle so much to see this team do poorly, because they have so many great pieces on this team, but they just have not been able to get it together. I don't know if it's a coaching thing. I don't know if it's just a leadership thing. I really don't know what the big thing is with this team, but they just have not been able to get things together. But I still think they are a stronger team than Boston. I still think they're a stronger team than, of course, the teams at the bottom of the Western region. They are not a bad team. I think they're an inconsistent team whose highs are really, really good and whose lows are pretty bad. And when they tend to hit their lows more often than their highs, it's very hard to rank this team high on the list. They have stars. They have very talented pieces, of course, with Decay, Happy, Assassin, Mag, Vigilante has looked very, very good this season. We just don't see them hit their peaks enough to be any higher on this list. They made the kickoff clash and then didn't make the midseason madness. They're very inconsistent, very up and down. I'm curious to see how they finish the season off. Full rest of the season, full tournament cycle with Vigilante. Can they get themselves back in shape? Can they right the ship that they have kind of seen sinking around them a bit? And can they push that final distance to make it into the playoffs at the end of the season? Only time will tell at this point, but I definitely have concerns with this Justice roster based on what we've seen. They should be performing better than they are, but I think we have to definitely attribute some of these shortcomings to leadership and coaching, and it's definitely time to see this roster step up or make some changes. All right, with all 8 of the teams that missed the midseason madness out of the way, let's get to the team that made the midseason madness that I rank at the bottom of that group, and that for me is the Toronto Defiant here in the 12 spot. I was not impressed by Toronto during their tournament appearance. I thought they had the worst, or at least weakest, performance of any team in the tournament. Obviously losing to the Shanghai Dragons and the Houston Outlaws. Not really a great showing from them. I think this is a team that has talent in some roles, of course. We've seen good performances from Hisu. I think Churong and Twilight are very, very good parts for this team. Finale's been, okay. Tanks have been okay, but they just haven't been great. They haven't been as strong as they kind of need to be to compete in this Western region where we have really strong teams and really, really, really good MVP caliber candidates on, your San Franciscos, your Gladiators, your Fuels, your Reigns, even your Spitfires. These are teams that are having really great performances and are really shining and showing up in ways that we don't necessarily expect from them all the time. And we're not seeing that level of performance from the Defiant. They're able to beat a lot of those lower level teams, and they get some of those close matches against some of those teams around them. But when it comes to those higher level teams in the region, Toronto just doesn't compete. And I think that that's a concern for a team that has such talented pieces on it that they're not really able to live up to the expectations people had for them going into the season. So good team for sure, but not an elite team, not a great team. So I have them here at number 12. Finally, for this first video, coming in at number 11, I have the London Spitfire. I was a little disappointed by their showing in the kickoff clash, which is ironic because they did win a game. They won against the Atlanta Reign, but then they fell to the Shock and the Mayhem, which the Shock game, not surprising. The Mayhem was, for me, a surprise. I thought the Spitfire should have been better than the Mayhem, but they fell still to a team that I thought that they probably should have, or most of the time I would have expected the Spitfire to win. I'm still impressed by what we've seen from the Spitfire. I think they have well outperformed my own expectation for this team. Very, very good kickoff clash qualifier for them, of course, 5-1. So really, this team has a lot of things to be proud of. They obviously have their own style. They play a very different way than the rest of the league does, obviously. A lot of rush composition, which you don't see necessarily in a lot of the other teams. So I think they're a fun team to watch. They're an exciting team to watch. I don't think they have the potential to really compete with the highest level teams, but they certainly can win games against good teams. I think that they're in a better position than Toronto right now because I think London has shown that they can beat good teams like Atlanta. They can beat good teams in ways that we haven't seen from Toronto. And so I think that you have to give the Spitfire an edge here. But their tournament performance for me was a little lackluster with their loss to the Mayhem, a team that I think they should have beaten. And for me, hard to really look past that. Definitely in this group of teams here, in that kind of middle bottom, if you will, of the Western region where there's good teams here, but I don't think any of these teams are elite. And the Spitfire coming in for me at 11. And that is all for part 1 of my mid-season power rankings. Little tease for some of the teams in the tournament from the Mid-Season Madness, but the rest of the 10 teams that made the tournament will be the top 10 teams, which we will get to on Friday, so stay tuned for that. If you are interested and excited to see more power rankings from me, there you go. Top 10 coming on Friday. But that is all for this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you agree with my list, disagree with my list, agree with my reasoning, but disagree with my placement, whatever it may be, let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. That's going to be all for me for today. I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.